In C++ class, the member functions, especially constructors and setter functions, are designed to receive data and set it to the data variables or make change in the data variables. Directly setting received data to the data members may lead to errors during the program execution. Therefore, it's really important to check the validity of the received data and use it only if it is valid. We will focus on parameter data validation for class functions, constructors, and setters. I will begin with the following code. This is the outcome of my previous recording on constructors and destructors. Let me quickly describe this code. This code has a class student. It has the data member's name, ID, and marks object. This is an object which is of type this marks, which has its members, marks, and size. Name and marks are to store the data in dynamic memory space. More specifically, they are pointing to dynamic memory spaces where the data would have been stored. This is a default constructor to set these data members to default values. This is a function to check whether the object in a default state or not. This is a function custom constructor with three parameters to receive ID, name, and the marks object and copy that data into it. This is another constructor with two parameters which actually receives ID and name and sets into the name and ID data attributes, and it sets the marks object to the default state. This is a set function which is a setter function to receive to perform basically what this constructor does, but it needs to actually do some cleaning off before it copies the data into the attributes. This is a display function which actually displays ID and name, and marks is displayed when it is the valid, it is in valid state, otherwise it will display this text. And finally, the destructor will actually release the memory space, dynamic memory that was allocated and pointed by name attribute and the marks attribute of the marks object member. And this is the function which actually uses the class, the default constructor, and display function, invocation of is default function, and set function, and again display function. This is 3 argument constructor and display through that object. This is a 2 invocation of 2 argument constructor and invocation of display function from the object that is created through that constructor. So now here first of all, let us talk in the default constructor. We don't have a data received, so we don't need to do a validation in this case. In the case of this custom constructor, we actually need to do validation. Otherwise, you will attempt to copy invalid data. For example, if there is a null PTR in the name, then you will be invoking this function. So this function will go into that memory space and try to read the data from there. So what that means is you are actually this code will attempt to read try to read a memory location which is not legal. So this result into runtime errors. So you need to first make sure that the received data is valid, and then after that you can copy it. So the way of testing the validity of received data is you should have the assumption about the validity of the data, right? For example, I'll say the data is valid when ID is positive. For example, if PID is positive, this is one thing I would make sure that make sure in the incoming data, and I would also make sure that pname is not pointing to null ptr, and I also, if in this case I actually would accept id and name and copy the id and name into the attributes. So this will make the object valid. Otherwise, if data is not valid, then I would set this attributes to the default state, which is what we have done in the default constructor here. And for the marks object, we do the same thing. If p marks dot name not equals to null ptr, and dot size is greater than 0. In that case, you consider the marks object data is valid, so you do copying, a little bit of indentation here, and otherwise you actually set marks object to default null ptr. So this is a I mean statement that would set the marks object to default state, and these are the statement that will copy the data into it. So this is the validation that we want. Then if invalid data is object is created using invalid data, the object will not copy, it will set in default state. If it is created using valid data, it is valid data is passed into constructor, then it will actually use that data and copy into the this attributes. So this is the statement that checks validation of the data, whether data is valid or not. In this case also we have marks object, data validation for marks object. So this is the data validation you want to enforce in the constructor. Similarly, in this constructor also you want to validate the data the way you did in the first part of this code here. If id, let's say if p id is positive and p name is not equals to null ptr, then you do copying, as name equals to null ptr and id equals to 0. So for the marks object we don't do that, because we through this statement we are actually setting it to the default state. So this is we don't need to make any changes here. We don't need to do validation for the marks object in this constructor. Now in the set function we also need to do the same. For example, if first when you invoke the set function, then you actually need to release the memory. That is the first thing you do. Then you do the validation in this place. If let's say p id is positive and p name not equals to null ptr, then you copy this two things, name and id. Then after that else you set it to the default values, and id equals to 0. Similarly for marks object also you actually you copy the size of this release. Let me just move before. So you need to release the marks object once it is set function is called. Then assumption is that either the data is set to the new data, the attributes are set to the new data, or they are in the invalid state. So here you want to have a validation if statement. If size is greater than 0 and marks not equals to null ptr, you just copy everything, else right. So let me just do proper indentation. Yeah, and else. So we have uh, first we release the dynamic memory, and then after that we do the validation and then copy data. If not valid, you set to the default values. Similarly here, you release the dynamic memory, and if it is valid, you copy the data, otherwise you set to the default state here. In the display function, sometimes you also want to check, for example, if name is null ptr, then you don't want to read that display name. Therefore, uh, for example, in this case, in this code, we have this is default function that is invoked. Sometimes you also want to do validation inside, so that if the display function is called, the user will be able to just call the display function, and which will display whether object is data is valid, it will display data, otherwise it will display something like this, text, something like this. So here, if let's say id is positive and name not equals to null ptr, then you actually display entire thing, else you can, I think you can do something like this. Let me put it here. So else so if id and name is not valid, then you don't bother about the marks. You, I mean, consider entire object is not valid. And once id and marks are displayed, and then you actually do validation of marks object data, and if it is okay, I mean, then you display the marks, otherwise you actually display this text not available or empty, whatever. So this is the proper way of having this contents in the display function. For the destructor, we don't have to do make changes. I think the destructor is okay, we don't need to do validation. Sometimes, if some people I mean want to do I mean execute delete operator only if it is not uh, pointing to null ptr, or it is pointing to valid dynamic memory address. Therefore, you may also want to do name equals to not equals to, then you delete, and if let's say marks obj marks not equals to null ptr, and you delete it. So this is optional, you can do, I mean, you can have this if statement check, or thus you can skip it. So this is the validation you want to do, and after the implementation of these things, this validation logic, we don't need to use this function, I mean, in the place where we actually use that code. This display function will automatically take care of that validation. So here, right, so remove, and again remove here. So this is the everything I want to talk. Let me quickly switch to the terminal and see what output we can get after these changes. This was the previous output. Object is empty and this thing and not available. When the marks is not available, it was displayed. Let me compile again. I think there is a typo issue in line 40 and 48. Let me see. Go to the core here. Oh, I think this should be the marks and marks. Okay, let me go back to the terminal again. So we can see invalid object was displayed by the I mean display function itself. This is actually placed inside the display function, and this obviously not available is inside the display function. And previously this was, let me go back and see whether this is because of any problem with the core or not. So here I think this display function, this actually displayed marks as invalid. So let me go back to this set function. So we have, and marks so I think I don't know what is happening. So size greater than 0 and not equals to null ptr. Size and in the display function not equals 0, not equals null ptr. Let me go ahead and try to compile one more time. Still I think I would expect it to display this this marks here. So what is the problem? 1001 Jackson is getting marks, and we have the set function. I think we have a small issue here. Okay, I think we have a problem here because this validation should not be carried out on the marks object. It should be carried out on this parameter. So that was the problem. Let me make change to it. It should be p marks size and p marks is non ptr. Then we copy bmarks and you allocate the memory and uh, this size and copy one. I think this should be okay now. So this was the problem was that instead of using the parameter object in the validation, I actually used the attribute, the member object in the validation, which is incorrect. So let me go back to the terminal and execute one more time. Yeah, now we have what we expected. I expected this marks displayed here. So okay, this is all I have to talk about the validation. Thank you for watching this video.